I've been using the OSD 5-channel amp for a few years now. Now we have 3 and 7-channel versions for those looking to add more power to their home theater systems. But are they any good? Let's find out. For full disclosure, OSD did send these out free for me to review. They used to be a channel sponsor of mine, they aren't currently, and because they were my channel sponsor prior, I was a little bit more critical of their products, as they know, because I didn't want to be accused of being biased. They had some products that I wasn't overly impressed with, and I said so in my video. These aren't one of those products. I am thoroughly impressed with these. Another thing is that I typically like to do objective measurements. This is not one of those videos because I don't have the equipment required to do measurements of these amplifiers. So this is going to be a purely subjective video, as long as you guys know. All right, so real quick, let's go to the desk and take a look at some quick specs.
Right here we are on OSD's website. And so here I have the XA3200. This is the new 3-channel amp. The 5-channel amp is the XA5180, which I've had for a while, and the new 7-channel XA7180. They share a lot in common, specifically the internal parts. If we take a look at the inside here, you'll see this giant toroidal transformer. So what's not reflected in these pictures is how many of these amplifier modules they have. So on the 3-channel, they have 1, 2, 3. So what we're looking at here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 modules. So this is the 7-channel version. He just didn't change the picture here. Here's another look from the side. What's important to note here is they're all sharing the same toroidal transformer. So you can imagine that if you're sharing this power supply with 7 channels of amplification, then you're going to notice that they have lower wattage per channel. So this one, the 7-channel is 130 watts RMS into 8 ohms. The 5-channel is 150 watts RMS, and the 3-channel is 165 watts RMS. Now this is according to their specs. Like I said, I don't have any equipment to measure this and verify for myself. What you'll also notice is if you go down to 4 ohms, you'll get more power. So a lot of the speakers that I use are actually 4 ohm speakers. So for the 3-channel at 4 ohms, it's 270 watts per channel. For the 5-channel, it is 250 watts. And for the 7-channel, it's 215 watts. They claim a signal to noise ratio of 115 dB. And they are considered Class H. From my understanding, it's kind of like a more efficient Class AB amplifier. You can take a look at their site and it explains in a little bit more detail here how Class H works. If you take a look at the back, the main difference is just how many channels they have. And so for the 3-channel, you have your RCA input, or you have the option of balanced XLR input if your preamp has that option. And then from there, you have your 5-way binding post for the speaker terminals. There are also different ways to have this power on. So you can either have it so it's off, in which case you have to press the button to turn it on, or you can have it auto sense based on the signal. So when it senses the signal, it'll turn on. Or what I do is my AVR has a remote connection. So I just use a cable going from here to the AVR, and this automatically turns them on. It does come with a pretty nice IEC power cable if you're into that. I don't feel the need to upgrade, but you can if you want to. On the front, you'll see some lights that correspond to the number of channels that you have, which I find is handy because it'll show you which ones are receiving a signal. I'll leave a link in the description to all of these if you want to take a look at some of these specs in more detail.
So quickly, let's talk about why you may want to use external amplification. One reason might be because your AVR can process up to 11 channels, but only has 9 channels of amplification, in which case you need to use external amplifiers. Another reason people get external amplifiers is because they think that it'll give them better dynamics just because they have more power. And so let's say when a dynamic scene hits and there's some bass, it doesn't take away from the other channels. There might be some truth to that, but I don't have the equipment to test that. And I haven't personally experienced that, but let's go with it. That goes along with the next reason, which is if you're going to be running your speakers full range for any particular reason, let's say if you have large floor standards all around, then you can run them and you will need more power. So it's nice to have that extra headroom with external amplification. And last, if you want to use your AVR as a pre-pro, or if you only have a pre-pro, in which case you don't have any amplification built in, well, you're going to need some external amplifiers, especially with a lot of these newer, less expensive pre-pros that I'm seeing around $1,000, under $2,000. Those are awesome. But again, you need amplification. That's when something like these amps come in. Now, as far as why I use them And that's because I just think it's pretty badass to have power amps. More power is better, right? One reason that might be counterintuitive is that it actually makes my system run cooler, because typically the AVR gets very hot when I'm using the internal amps on that. They're class AB, and so now I can actually just use it as a pre-pro and not use the internal amplification. These are class H and are more efficient, and actually my entire system uses less power, as I can see from my surge protector, which shows me the amperage rating that I'm using. I'm actually using less power overall when I'm using these power amps at the same volume. So when I'm using less power, that also means that it runs cooler, and that's handy here in Southern California where it gets really hot, especially in this area, and I could use a little bit less heat so I don't have to use the AC as often when I'm running power amps. Next might seem silly, but I just like the sound of them turning on. Just the relays clicking on. I just love hearing those, and again, just badass. So the next reason is, as a reviewer, I don't know which speakers are going to come in. I might get some very low sensitivity ones, some very inefficient ones, and I need extra power. I never know, so it's good to have that extra power on tap. And last, it might just be because I need to turn off certain amps. So I have the 3-channel setup for my left, center, and right, the main speakers that I'm using, the ones that need the most power. And so I have an amp for those. If I need to turn those off, I can just press one button and turn off the amp just for those speakers. And then I have the 5-channel amp for my rest of my ear level speakers, my left and right surrounds, my left and right rear surrounds. And the reason I do that is because those don't need as much power as the front. So the more power that you're dividing up, the less power you have per channel, as you can see from the specs. So then for my left and right front height speakers and left and right front rear speakers and the voice of God, that's 5 channels, I run those on my 7-channel amp. I also run the bass shaker from there, so I don't have to use another amp. So that's 6 channels, and I have an extra one in case I want to go with the Oro setup with a center height. I have that option, but I'm going to need a new AVR for that. And last, I think it's important to compare this to another amp that I had, and it is the Parasound A52 Plus, and that thing is a beast, also very expensive and very heavy. It was $3,000. Actually, not as heavy as the 7-channel, so that I thought that was interesting. And I think around the same weight as the 5-channel, so weight-wise, they're all pretty heavy. Let's go ahead and weigh each one on this scale. Try not to break the scale. All right, so this is the 3-channel, and it is showing up as 47 pounds. Here we have the XA5180. Let's go ahead and put it on here. 54.2 pounds. Here I have the Parasound A52 Plus. It has some handles on here. This thing is pretty heavy. 5-channel as well. And it is 52.8. What was the other one again? Pretty much the same. All right, that's a surprise. I thought it was going to be way heavier. As you can tell, I'm getting out of breath. But last one here is the 7-channel OSD, the XA7180. Let's go. 64.3. Heavy. The plan, I think, will be to put the heaviest one on the bottom, so the 7-channel, 5-channel, and then the 3-channel here. Now, the Parasound was a high bias class AB amp, meaning it ran class A up to a certain point, and then it went to class AB, and that amp ran pretty hot, noticeably hotter than the ones that I have here. And so, again, that's a factor for me. Now, none of that matters unless the amps sound good, and if there was an obvious difference between them, then I would have just stuck with the Parasound A52 Plus. But honestly, I couldn't tell any difference. I know some people might say, hey, that's crazy, there's a measurable difference. Measurable and what I hear are completely different. Of course, if I could, I would have just stayed with the class AB, even though it gave off more heat, but that's not what I experienced. Actually, what I noticed is that the Parasound had more noise, more hiss here in my garage, and it might just be because I have dirty power coming from the power lines here, and maybe these are just less susceptible to that noise coming into the line. I'm not sure exactly, but I never had an issue with the Parasound before in my old apartment. It was quiet when I reviewed it. It's just when I moved to this place, I could hear noise, a little bit of a whine, and that's one of my pet peeves. And so the OSD amps had much less of that. They're actually pretty quiet, And so I'm happy with that. And last, these are just significantly less expensive than the Parasound A52 Plus. For the same price, I can get more amplification, you can get more amplification, and so it might be something to consider. If you are all about that Parasound life and you have the money to spend, hey, I think they're great amps too. But if you're like me and you're always just trying to find the best bang for your buck, well, you may want to look at these OSD amps. So in conclusion, if you're in the market for external amplifiers, power amplifiers, you may want to look at OSD's offerings because they have the 3, 5, and 7 channel. You can configure those in any way that you want. You just have more options instead of some other brands who may only have 5 channel, right? You may want, 13 channels. What are you going to do? You're going to have to buy 2 5 channels, and then actually you're going to have to buy 3 5 channels instead of just buying 2 5 channels and a 3 channel. It's always good to have options. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. So if you're interested in these, I'll leave a link to them down below in the description. So if you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. That's it. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. We're done. Papa. Thank you.